Hello, welcome back to our October thrills as we delve into the depths of depravity. Welcome to the home. I'm off center again.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, welcome to the weekend. Thank you for joining us again. It's been a minute since we've been recording. You can probably tell by the quality starting. It's already terrible. To my right, as always, is my overly artistic friend, Mitch. Mitch,
What's up?
thank you for joining me.
I'm relaxed. I'm on this couch, as you can see.
Yeah,
It's a
clearly
little small. It's snug, but it's good.
You're definitely not on the couch. I'm Tyler, your host. So we just watched a couple of movies. What did we watch?
Sorry, the novelty of this has not overstayed its welcome yet, so I must. What happens to my hand?
It's so tiny comparatively. Like, what does mine look like?
What a way to begin this particular episode.
Yeah, for real. It's our mental illness.
I know. You asked me a question. What was that question?
What did we watch?
Oh, we watched Joker 2, or something French.
Nailed that one. Let's see. 3, 4. Oh,
yeah.
On here. Let's see.
Yeah, so we're doing a Rotten Tomatoes episode on the two Joker films.
I just pulled it up because I want to know. Folie,
Deux, I think. Actually,
probably not. So that's so we just watched Joker 2 in theaters.
Yep.
And then decided we wanted to go back and watch the first one again.
I'm glad we did because there was a lot of details that I had forgotten about. It's been a long time. It was 2019 when it came out. I think I saw it shortly after. Well, I think I saw it the year after, actually. Because you showed it to me. I missed it in the theater. It's bugging you?
Yep.
Okay.
You look great. I'm in a room at my parents' house.
Relax.
In the middle of a move. So I don't have my setup. I am rather disoriented, clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I showed it to you. That was the first time you saw it, yeah?
I think so.
Did you see it after that?
No.
Is that the only time you see it?
No, so this was the second time seeing it.
Okay.
And yeah, it was great. I mean, I loved it the first time. I loved it this time. It was so much different than what I expected because, the Joker character is associated with Batman. And so you assume that it's going to be like some comic book thing. And the premise of it was just sounded so lame to me. It's like, oh, we got to drug up a villain because we've told the Batman story too many times. So now let's do the villain's perspective. It's like, villain's perspective. But then I went and saw it, or I didn't go to see it, but you showed it to me. And I was like, wow, this is way different. It wasn't really a superhero movie at all. It was totally human and grounded and about some really deep, dark, and very serious subject matter. And I thought they tackled it with a lot of thoughtfulness. And I think the execution just as a film was really impressive as well. So it really just culminated into quite the experience. It was not at all what I was expecting. I think it was not what a lot of people were expecting, but I think it delivered on that. And you showed it briefly with the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it went over really well. I think, regardless of what people were expecting, I think they were satisfied that it was just such a compelling narrative to watch and that it was so like entrenched with like a lot of like inner frustrations, right? Because it's like that sort of person who's beaten down by society and then they get their revenge. And so even if you don't agree with the character, which you shouldn't, you should feel conflicted about it
naturally.
But there is a sentiment there that I think is really potent.
If you sympathize with this character, go see a doctor or someone. Please go. Yeah. I remember seeing this and not knowing what to think at first before I saw it, because same thing. I was like, Joker. Like I knew that it had some dissociation from DC, but DC was putting out a lot of movies, so I was like, so is this something they're kind of testing the waters and then they'll connect later, or is this just something they're just going to put out there? And then it had a lot of surrounding media attention for
Yeah.
different reasons, which I thought I was going to get into here, but I thought, nah, I just want to evaluate the film itself. So we're just going to talk about that and not the things that surrounded it or prefaced it. So when I went and saw it, or who I saw it with, I don't remember that at all. Jeez.
Hmm.
I just remember sitting there, amazed because it's a beautiful movie.
Yeah. Cinematography is gorgeous.
Cinematography is gorgeous. The set design is beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I had nothing but good things to say. The music is incredible.
Oh yeah.
Which if you have not heard it, I would highly recommend just listening to that by itself. But yeah, and on top of all that, it was surprising because you have preconceived notions based off the name, right? Because of the character. You're like, okay, I think it's gonna go X, Y, or Z. And you'd already seen a couple of adaptations. You saw the Dark Knight Joker, and then you saw the Suicide Squad Joker.
And there was the Mark Hamill Joker. So like we've seen, and even like the Jack Nicholson one, everybody has seen and come across the Joker on film. And for him to get his own movie now and take center stage, I think there was a lot of pressure of like, ooh, who could take on that level of, because at least with Heath Ledger, I mean, he did a great job too, but like he still had Christian Bale to cover a good chunk of the runtime to help him out, and Joaquin Phoenix, it's like you're doing a solo act. If you fail to pull off this character, it doesn't work. And he did an enormously good job because he humanizes the character. When I say humanizes, I don't mean necessarily like
he doesn't make him sympathetic.
Yeah, not really. It's more like he just brings in a lot of real world human things to the character that exist, and you recognize them, and you're like, ooh, that hits home because now it's doing parallels with real life in a really interesting way. He's this like, mentally challenged person. He has this like compulsive laughter that he can't control, and he laughs in just awkward situations or when he's stressed or things like that. And so it's just strange. And like the way he laughs, I mean, people have talked about this to death, I'm sure. But like it's crazy because you can see it like what he does with like his eyes and like his facial, like it's just like so strained and like he's in pain and like he's like he will go into coughing. And so it's just this like uncomfortable. I mean, it's a horribly dark and uncomfortable movie, but it's great. Anyways.
Yeah, the word that I used to describe it was oppressive because you feel heavy and just sad. It's like going to a funeral.
Yeah.
Because you see this guy's descent and everything that goes wrong. And so the first 15 minutes of the movie is kind of just explaining the weight that's already on his shoulders and showing you that. And then the rest of the film is the progressive bricks that are placed onto his shoulders that eventually snap him.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so given this rating, I mean, what would you have given it yourself had you not, if you just went and valued this as a critic?
Yeah, I'd give it 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
For what reasons? Why is that?
Well, so I might be slightly generous in the sense that I'm not one of those people who's like, well, there's only 10 movies in the world that deserve 100%, and that's it. I think that's ridiculous. I think there's lots of movies that can deserve 100%. So it's not like, I just, there was nothing else I thought the movie needed to do. There was nothing else I really wanted the movie to do. I guess if I had a gripe, it would be some of the music choices, not the composer, but like some of the other music choices. A lot of them are old school. I think they were trying to pull on something there that I just really wasn't familiar with, and it just didn't really it didn't really do much for me. But it's not for very long, so whatever. It's like such a
It barely affects it, and I actually took it differently. I thought that those pieces were placed to kind of symbolize his like breakthrough, I suppose, because they're all played at moments that he's becoming something else.
I just prefer the composer to do that work for me.
The composer did such a great job. I get the sentiment.
But yeah,
beautiful music.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was incredibly timely. I thought it was incredibly deep and moving. I thought it was really powerfully executed, and just like it's such a dark movie that it's hard to revisit, but at the same time it feels like a very important one to talk about because it just taps into like that kind of, there's like this whole classism structure about how people are just who like like the billionaires, like the Thomas Wayne character. One of my favorite parts that I was picking up on this time is that, after the Joker kills some people on the subway who were bullying him, they're like, why did this happen? And they bring in Thomas Wayne to talk about it. And he's like, oh, well, they did it, it's like, it's the coward's way out or whatever. And it's like, oh,
Yeah, and then he
man.
compares himself. He's like, yeah, people like me who have done something with our lives, we just kind of look down on clowns like that who just don't have it. They don't have anything going for them. It's like, okay, really, what you? But it's
But
also interesting too, because I'll just say now, spoiler alert. We'll just
yeah.
if you don't want to know,
Yeah.
welcome to 2000 late. He you get at the end and you realize that this is all it makes it almost seem like this is just something that Arthur Fleck has been telling someone because he's in a
Yes.
white room and he's got a microphone and
Uh-huh.
he's in the Arkham Asylum,
Right.
so it's almost like some tall tales that he's been telling, and so you don't really know what reality is at any point in the movie because they mess with your sense of reality during the movie, and at the end it's kind of like maybe none of that was true,
Yeah.
and so it makes you wonder like maybe I was just running around inside the mind of a crazy person for this whole film rather than figuring out how he became crazy.
Yeah.
This is how he perceives reality.
Mm-hmm.
But that scene was interesting when you were talking about it before we jumped on. Was what if that's just the way he remembered it? Because he was like projecting this character onto Thomas Wayne. Maybe he
Yeah.
wasn't so callous,
Uh-huh.
but he perceived him that way because he was like in the throes of ecstasy, having done
Yeah.
something that set him free, as it were. So I
And that,
thought, yeah, interesting way either way.
yeah, because it's such a fascinating concept. I'm not going to get into like applying it necessarily too much, but
Sure.
it's not hard to imagine the same scenario play out over and over and over for so many of us who you look at like a famous politician or a billionaire, they comment about something on the news, and you're going, that's not how it's like at all. That's like such a common theme nowadays,
Right.
that disconnect, because we have so much media, we have so much reporting, we're just like constantly aware of everything. And with that awareness comes like these vast limitations of what people are actually able to like understand. And so it was just kind of like, even if Thomas Wayne is well meaning, he doesn't come across that way on the news because he's like totally removed from this guy's
Right.
situation. And here we are watching Arthur, which is, the character's name, and just how miserable and awful, like how horribly he's mistreated, how like he just has no friends, he has no community, he has no connection with anyone, and he's like so lonely and sad and
He also can't
depressed.
figure it out. That's the interesting
Yeah,
thing about the film. And I think that's what the stairs represent because it has a couple of visual psychology. So
motifs.
yeah, motifs, sure.
Yeah.
The main one, the famous one, are the stairs. So everybody remembers him dancing down the stairs at the end, but
Yeah.
um, the two scenes before it were that he goes up the stairs twice and it's dark and he's
Yeah.
kind of depressed and he's got his shoulders
And he's
sagging and he's just
slumping
kind of
up.
like
Yeah.
can't get through this and I just got to keep walking, I got to keep trudging uphill, and it's when he descends into madness that he
Mm-hmm.
dances down the stairs and it's bright and daylight and like
Mm-hmm.
the music plays and then it fades into her theme of his madness essentially.
Yeah, he's just given over to it.
Right.
Just what it is.
This,
And
yeah.
yeah.
This is the only way I'll feel quote unquote happy, as he
Yeah.
calls it in the movie. So it's those are interesting, and they try and do something similar in the second one where they have a light theme, and it was only a couple times in the film, but I remember, and they play the stairs as well. But as he's going up the stairs, the lights turn on, and he's walking up to Harley, and then he doesn't make it to the top of the stairs, and he turns and goes back down. I forgot what the reason was. That someone starts chasing him or whatever.
Spoiler for the end of.
Yeah, sorry, you're not missing anything. But yeah, so they tried playing similar themes with not so great effect. The first one is so intrinsically valuable to the story that they're
Yeah.
telling. That's something we noticed was that the script is really tight. There's barely any fat in this movie. Like everything is just really well told, and it's engaging from start to finish. And even the beginning where it's kind of slow, where they're just kind of establishing him, even that's really well done.
Well, yeah. So what's your rating then for the first movie? What would you give it?
I think I'd go with somewhere between like a 95, 96, something like that, just because it's something I wouldn't watch often. And so I have that rule for movies that I really love, but not this one. So if a movie stands out to me and something that's like one of my favorite films, I won't watch it very often. I
Yeah.
like keeping it kind of fresh and fun. The Joker is such an oppressive film. You just come away feeling like, ugh. Like it's tough. It's like I said, it's like
Yeah.
going to a funeral, and so I don't
Uh-huh.
experience that very often voluntarily. So it's just one of those that I won't revisit
Yeah.
that often, but I recognize the merit of it. Extremely well shot, extremely well directed, extremely well
Hmm.
written. The acting is superb. Music is one of my favorite soundtracks. Like
Yeah.
everything about it is just really good. It's like one of those. It's. I think it'll go down as a classic in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think this will be an incredibly important film to look back upon as like a window into society. And the funny thing is you saw that critic score, it was 68. That's pretty low. In fact, I would say that's very low for what this movie should be. This movie should have been like an easy 97 for critics. Um and their whole shtick, I think, is they are uncomfortable about the way it engages with our political discourse right now.
Right.
But the thing is in 20 years, that this will now provide commentary and reflection on our time,
But
and
almost
that
gives it more artistic merit because of that.
it does. And I
Right.
also think that the closest parallel I would cite with this movie is actually Rocky, because Rocky is a film about a guy who's down on his luck and nobody treats him well, and he's really struggling in life, and he's in a big city
Hmm.
and he's just having a hard time. It's the hard knocks. But then what happens in that movie is he eventually figures out a way to like really commit to something. And he's like, I'm going to prove myself wrong. I've been sort of telling myself the wrong message. And now I'm going to tell myself the right message.
Hmm.
And it's not even that I'm going to win. It's just that this is my goal. And I'm going to reach and attain my goal. So it's like finding a little bit of humanity for yourself is kind of what that movie's really about,
Right.
which you
Well, an
remember that.
achievement too. I mean, it
Yeah.
kind of pulls yourself out of this funk essentially, where you think that
Right.
you're worthless, you think that you can't
Right.
make it.
And you remember that that movie came out in the 70s when things were really hard on people. You got wars going on, hard economic times. You've got a lot of controversy. And so, I think it connected with people so easily, Rocky did, because it was just like, geez, that's what it feels like to just be
Hmm.
out here in the dumps and just
Well, it
struggling.
was also
It's,
Sylvester Stallone's
yeah.
story as well,
So it was like kind of
and that
true.
movie was the success.
Yeah. He
So it's
made
almost
this.
like foretelling his own success.
Right. It's like he was a good person in like these rough circumstances, and it was really inspiring to see that.
Right.
So this movie takes that premise and does it.
Just flips it. Yeah.
Well, it does a much darker version of it, where it's like he's not coming to a happy conclusion.
Right.
He's coming to an extremely disturbing, nihilistic perception of things. But that's interesting because I do think a lot of people nowadays will dive into that, whether they intend to or not. No one seems to be like, well, I'm going to hold on to like hope. Everyone's just like, ugh, angst, stick it to the man.
Yeah,
There's a
just
lot
fight
more.
back even when we don't have a clear ideology. Just
Yeah,
fight it.
well, like they have in the movie with all the people who dress up as clowns because they're inspired by him, and they have signs that says like "resist" or whatever. So they're like, the system, you know. So
But yeah, and that was an interesting message too, because it was something. So he has a scene at the end where he goes on this national television on this show that's nationally
yeah,
televised, and he decides to make a statement. And initially, he's working up to making one statement,
yeah,
and then makes a different one
yeah,
in the heat of the moment.
yeah,
And he kind of embodies the problems that he has before unleashing terror upon the world, essentially.
yeah,
Um, but the interesting thing is that so he sends this message. People see that message and interpret it the way that they want to.
yeah,
And so his message is, you guys are not looking at me. I'm the disenfranchised. I'm the hurting. I'm the broken down and trodden.
right.
And everyone else is like, well, so are we. So we're just going to take that message and apply it to ourselves. When he's like, no, that was about me.
This was my moment.
This is my moment. But they use that and they just start riots and fires and they just take over the city.
Yeah, they even use the same line because
Right.
he creates this joke, and at the end of it, he's just like, "You get what you deserve," or he says like, "What happens when a mentally ill person is like mistreated by society or something like that,
Yeah,
right? And then he
essentially.
says, and it's like, you get what you deserve. And then he shoots the host.
Right.
And then,
This person that he's idolized for a
right.
while, he just removes his idol, says, "Oh, well, this guy ridiculed me. He's kind of the epitome of everything that I have problems with, and so I'll just
Yeah.
remove it. I'll just get it out. Like, I'm not going to remove myself, which was
Right.
his initial
Hmm.
solution. I'll just remove him."
Yeah.
And so he does that, and to everyone watching, it was like, well, he's removing part of the system that we hate. And not just, it wasn't just a personal thing, because it was personal for Joker, because
Yeah.
that guy ridiculed him specifically. Everyone else saw it as like him bucking against the system, essentially.
Right.
And then they idolize Joker.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Then
he gets his praise, but they're misinterpreting his initial meaning. So
there's this irony that's happening. Yeah.
right.
But they carry
Which is the joke.
Yeah, right. And I like the moment where it's like it does a recontextualization of Bruce Wayne's parents' death, where
Right.
you see some guy, he goes up, he's like, "Hey, Mr. Wayne, you get what you deserve," or something like that. So he says the
Yeah.
same line.
He takes Arthur's message and applies it to Thomas Wayne, who's this
Right.
billionaire. You know, he is the face
Right.
of everything that these people can't have or be.
Right. And so the whole movie just feels like an exploration of, you have this genuinely disturbed person who does these things that are really dark and horrific, and then other people rally to that. And so you got this like dark, like messiah type of figure happening. But the thing about it is, throughout the whole movie, this has been building, and there's been multiple instances in which society had a chance to not let this happen, and they just refuse. Like he goes to see Thomas Wayne at one point because he thinks that he's his long lost son, and so he's like, "Oh, Mr. Wayne."
Arthur thinks that Thomas is his
or
father.
his father, yeah. And Thomas Wayne just totally thinks, he's like, "Well, you're like a freak, like get away from me," basically punches him in the nose, and he's just like, "Your mother was delusional." It's like, this is a pretty mean thing to say. Like, and I get
Right.
you understand why he's saying these things. From his perspective, it just seems like some lunatic walked into the room. But like from the viewer's perspective, we're also aware of like, hey, this guy is like, he's just having it really hard, and he actually has not been malicious or mean to anyone. Like, he's trying to make a kid like laugh on like the school bus, and then like,
The mom gets all ticked off.
Yeah,
she's like,
she's
"Can you
just
stop
like,
bothering my child?"
yeah, just like super offended and stuff, and everybody's offended, and nobody can laugh, nobody. And so it's like you create this problem, and then you're upset when it's
turns
like,
back on you.
yeah, it turns back on you, it
Yeah.
bites you, and then there's this whole flock of people who are like, "I'm in that boat with you, I'm down for this stuff," and it's
Right.
like,
Just took one person to take the step, and they're like, "Let's go."
yeah, and that's commentary, right? That's them commenting like, look at what this system is creating,
Sure.
And it's like, how much does yeah, maybe this person was particularly unhinged, but it's like there are a lot of other people who are going to give in much earlier than that. Yeah, remember when you did this last time?
I did. All right.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, and I think, okay, so it when you bring that point up, it reminds me of something. Is he has a series of moments, and this is in the second one as well.
Yeah.
There's a series of moments where he does something awful, but then he has this contrasting moment.
Yes.
And it happens a lot. It's very specific who he targets, right?
Yeah.
People on the train. These guys are antagonizing this woman, and he starts laughing uncomfortably because that's how he deals with uncomfortable situations, and that's like his Joker tie-in or whatever.
It's like alarming situation,
Right.
so he's just like, I don't know how
Part
to
of his
process
mental
this
disorder.
emotion. Yeah.
But he also, you could tell that he wants to do something about the situation because they're oppressing this woman, and he's like, well, I can't do anything about it, but I'm uncomfortable and I want to, and so he just starts breaking down, and then they start making fun of him.
Yeah.
And then they start beating him up. They start essentially just bullying him until he snaps and he kills all three of them.
Yeah.
During that time, though, you can tell like he had good intentions with the woman.
Yeah.
And then he butchers these three.
Yeah.
And then same thing when he kills his coworker is that he butchers him.
Yeah.
And he lets the other guy leave.
And it is butcher. That is a nasty scene.
It's a rough scene.
It's like, oh, like I forgot how
visceral that one was. Yeah.
Jeez. But anyways, yeah, your point.
So the point was the dichotomy is that he's just retaliating against those that are intentionally hurting him.
Yeah.
or intentionally using him. And he's kind, or I guess kind's not really the word. He's almost apathetic to everyone else. He's like, well,
Mm.
you don't matter to me,
Yeah.
right? It's just like, I'm just trying to exist. These are the guys that are helping that or making that hard.
Uh-huh.
And I'm just going to take it out on them.
Yeah.
Same thing with the comedian with De Niro's character is that
Yeah.
he was mocking him on a national stage. And so,
Yeah, it's like, well, you can't mess with me anymore. You
right.
know.
Yeah,
It,
I've been oppressed my whole life. I thought that you were something different, and then you turned out to be the same as everyone else that's made my life hard. So
yeah.
I'm just gonna end your existence
Yeah.
on your show.
Because it is interesting that he does go to the show with the intention of killing himself on screen.
Right.
That is his goal. He rehearses it. He plans for that. And I think it's also interesting when you look at the way it happens. Like the woman has already gotten off the train and left by the time
He butchers those
he,
three,
he shoots the guys on the train.
but they haven't
So
stopped antagonizing him by that point. So
right.
it's like
So it's not so much
too
like
late.
it's like a snap decision, right? And there's no clarity as to like why he's doing this. I don't think he knows. It just is something that happens. And then like you see that when he kills the other guy and then lets his friend Gary go.
Mhm.
It's when that happens, it's almost like he starts to formulate like the dividing lines for him. It's like, okay, these people I kill, these people I don't. And starting to kind of draw those lines a little bit.
Hmm.
And then when he goes into the news show with Murray, he's sort of like sitting there. The intentional plan is there, but then he's getting mocked and ridiculed.
Right.
And then he starts pushing back
But
against
then it
that.
becomes retaliatory.
And he starts leaning into the insanity of it. He's like, yeah, I think it was funny that I killed those people because he's like, I can't do anything right. And it's like, it's that attitude where you're just like, I'm
Right.
just, and then he starts to like boil over and he's like, I got nothing else to lose. And then he
I was
makes
gonna
that
kill myself anyway, so why not just
yeah, why would I care about what anybody
Sure.
thinks anymore?
Why
And then
take it out on myself when I can just take it out on him?
yeah, and then he makes that snap decision and takes Murray out, and then it's
Right.
like, whoa. Um,
And there's a series of shocking scenes, and they're not just for shock value. That's what I liked about this film is that they're
Yeah,
conclusions that you can reach logically,
Right.
just on an objective standpoint.
mhm,
They're not conclusions that you yourself would reach as a normal person.
yeah.
You're just like, okay, I get why you're here. I would not personally do this, but I also am not in your situation. So,
yeah.
but I think that was the point of the film is to, and I think that's part of the backlash. So I was going to ask, I
Mhm.
guess I'll use this to lead in. Why
Okay.
do you think that it has that score?
The 68.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There was some pushback in the movie when it came out because it felt, I guess, like people were taking, I guess, this message of like, oh, it's a glorification of, you know, this mass murderer, basically.
Right.
And then it's also like they're worried about, like the Aurora shooter or whatever that, that horrible incident when The Dark Knight Rises came out and someone shot up a movie theater.
The Dark Knight Rises or Dark Knight?
It was Dark Knight Rises.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, it's like it had nothing to do with the Batman movie. It was just a popular movie.
Yeah, it was just because that theater was going to be packed because of what the movie was.
Yeah.
And so he knew he'd get the most amount of people, which sad all around, but yeah.
Yeah, but so basically, like, I just that's part of it is like it's controversial, and so it's easier to take the position of just saying like, well, we shouldn't be talking about this, and we shouldn't be making stories about this, and it's just gonna kind of it's like the age old going back to it. This is gonna propagate like something worse for society, but you have to remember that like every story is told.
It starts somewhere.
Yeah, it's like it's inspired by real life. And
Right.
so it's like it's coming from a place that is concerned and is looking at and invested in what's actually going on with us right now. There's ways to do that effectively and ineffectively. And I think they
True.
kind of just probably missed. I don't think it's necessarily the easiest film to grasp like the nuances of it because and this is where I think it being a comic book quote unquote movie comes into play because it's associated with this longstanding comic strip and there's the superhero movies and even though Batman movies are generally well received they're still comic book movies And that makes them genre movies, and that makes it very clear that this is like a hero versus villain story. And the original, or the Joker, the most recent one in our memories, is going to be Heath Ledger, and he was like just a philosophical construct. His whole thing was, I'm an agent of chaos, but you didn't really know why or like what led him to that place. And so this film is like, how does someone get there? And what it chose to use to explain that narrative are real world things. Like he basically starts the movie off with like him seeing like a counselor or someone to like help him with his condition. They're supposed to like talk about like his feelings and stuff, and then she prescribes him some medication,
which is
and,
all she does. That's the
which is
point.
all she does. Yeah, she doesn't help him
listen
at all.
to him. She's just like, here's some more meds. Go throw some more pills down.
Yeah, exactly. Like she's like, oh, like you're on 7 medications. Isn't that helping? It's like, dude,
no,
like,
I need at least 12.
Yeah, exactly. Throwing more meds is not going to solve this problem. And then like later on, when he's telling her that he finally feels seen, and she kind of ignores it, and then he just like stops her and is like, I just told you something crazy. Like this is the first time I've ever felt this in my whole life. And then she's just like, well, like, look, like here's the thing, we're like shutting down the program or whatever. It's like, dude, lady, like he's having a breakthrough.
Yeah, we're not meeting again. We're getting shut down. So
Right.
good for you. See ya.
But like that's where that again, so like it's making commentary about like the system of how like people with mental troubles are treated in society, especially in like big urban areas where they're just so packed with people. And it's like it's tragic and it's awful. So I don't know. I'm trying to make a guess as to what bothered people about it, because
right.
if you're just looking at it as a film and a story, it's incredible. But if you're trying to like point out how it's relating to real life, it's kind of dark and spooky. And if that makes you uncomfortable, I could see you being like, like we shouldn't be talking about this, or this isn't a. So maybe that's where like it's stemming from, and then they're gonna have their own interpretation of the film based on that. But it's sort of, but you see what I'm saying is like they go into it and they start seeing themes and parallels, and they're like, if they don't feel like it's being handled well, they're just gonna downvote it.
That's fair.
Right.
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of presuppositions surrounding it as well, because we read a couple of the reviews.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, this is just making these mass shooters sympathetic or something. And I was like, well, for one, he's not like a mass shooter necessarily. Like, I guess it depends on your definition of mass shooter.
Yeah,
but it's not
really.
It's not someone just snapping and going out and shooting random people. Like, he shoots people that are going after him, for one. For two, not sympathetic about this character.
Well, here's the thing.
You
it's
definitely understand. Like, they do a good job of showing you how he runs down this road and reaches the end and jumps off. But, like, it doesn't make you be like, well, he just needs a hug. Like, oh, no, he smothered his mother. Well, I think it's a lost cause.
Well, it kind of does though. I would be somewhere more in the mix of that, because I feel like part of what it's doing is saying like we don't really know his life experience well enough to be able to treat him or to address his problems like specifically. But we have to talk about it. And
because it exists. It exists as a problem.
Right. But like, I mean, it's the kind of, because some people were comparing it with like incels or whatever, and it's like the problem is
this one. Okay.
Yeah, but like the problem, because he's like, he lives with his mother, and he's like this.
I get the comparison.
Emasculated guy.
That's not the first thing that I would think of, though.
But here's the thing, like, because there is like a trend where people would rather not deal with, who they label as deplorables, because they're just deplorable to them, and that's the end. But like, I think that's the wrong approach, because if you do that, then it's like you're just depriving us of understanding. And what this film is trying to do is be like, you have to start understanding why this is happening. Like, this
or
is
know
a
what
dangerous,
to avoid. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a dangerous outcome. And I would never say that like he's not responsible. Like, he is responsible for a lot of the actions he takes here. But it's like, you gave him no other option. You realize that, right? And so, I think there's a kind of, face the music that this movie makes you do, and that like, hey, you were an enabler of this to happen.
Wouldn't that give it more merit, though?
It does. These are things that give it merit. Okay. I'm just saying it bothers people. It doesn't bother me. I found it interesting and important to talk about. But for some people, the truth hurts, and they don't want to talk about it.
I suppose. I still don't get well, like, why 68 at that point, though? I mean, you'd have to look at something that makes you uncomfortable and understand whether it has merit or not, right? I mean, if you're a critic, this is your job to evaluate.
Yeah.
And so it's odd to me. Like I said, when I was reading the scores, I was like, it looks like you just didn't watch the movie. It looks like you're just interpreting something that's not there.
Yeah.
Whether because you were looking for it when you were watching the movie, or you didn't watch the movie and you just assumed that that's what it was about.
Well,
That's how it seemed from what I was reading.
well, let me give you a question then, because you're giving it a 95 or 96, and you're holding it back because you don't feel like it's a movie that you want to revisit too often. Is that in part because of like why is that? Is that just because
I'm
it's
not
dark,
beholden
or
to such high standards as a critic is, and so I'm
you're like, so I can choose whatever I
I'm
want.
basing this mostly off my emotions, which I know that this is a tough movie to watch and swallow. No, I'm not saying that it is lesser artistic merit. I think it had a message. It told the message, and it told it extremely effectively. I don't think it could have done anything differently to do a better job.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, if you're looking at it as it is, right, it's a perfect film, in my opinion. I think
Yeah.
it's extremely well done. So, like, yeah, I guess it deserves 100 on that level, but I'm an audience member, and so, I want to
So,
be.
I'm just speaking for the audience. Okay?
I want to be an audience that comes back to this film, and it's a really hard movie to come back to. And so,
Okay.
like, to me, it's like, man, okay.
Gotcha.
I
That's fair.
I don't think it's a movie that shouldn't be seen. I think that's something to be said.
But that's a standard we would hold a critic to, wouldn't we?
That's what I would think. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where they're wrong. Like, is it a movie that should be seen?
Yeah. Does
The
it have
answer is yes. So that means you need to rate it appropriately and not be
Sure.
like downvoting it.
But yeah,
you know?
68 is way too. Like, even if
Yeah.
you go to 90 or something, it's just it is a valuable story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
It has a valuable message, and it tells it effectively where it communicates it to where critics and audiences can understand it. Obviously, audiences loved it.
Yeah.
And I'm not, part of. So this is the other problem I have with the scoring system is, people were aware of what was being said about Joker. And I think a lot of those viewings, I mean, and potentially it's something that spiked its ratings, which is great. But I think some of those viewings or this rating may have even been spiteful, is because, like, you guys said that it was going to be this, and it wasn't. So, like, I'm just going to give it a high rating because screw you guys. Like, you're trying to tell me something that it's not. And it's almost like you're trying to deter people from watching the movie, when in reality, it's a good movie. Like,
yeah,
it's like I said, it's an effective film and has a I think it's a valuable message.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think and I'm not saying it doesn't deserve that score. I'm saying that I wonder how much that was influenced, and that's the problem I have. Is like, I would like to see a pure score, not based on people's presupposed bias, but based on what your actual evaluation of the film is after you've seen it, obviously.
We'll bring us back, like, because to that, I would say there are. So I think it's really interesting that Joker was nominated for, like, I think 11 Academy Awards. It was the biggest movie of the Oscars in terms of, like, nominations, and then it won 2 for music and for Joaquin Phoenix.
Okay,
so
those are deserved. That's fair.
Right.
I think cinematography should have won too, but okay, sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and maybe like costumes and production design. I mean, really, like everything about the movie is great.
I think this should have, and you know what, whatever was in the movie should have won.
Yeah,
and it just should have, all of it should have won.
But like that's like a different measure that I think is. I'm kind of like, yeah, like I like that the Oscars was not really bothered by its critical score, because they do monitor that usually, but they also monitor sales, and they also are concerned with like what the film is about and is it providing that window into real, like, our current society. And this movie absolutely is. So I think for them it was inevitable that they were like, oh no, yeah, this is totally
gonna be here.
This is totally a Best Picture nominee kind of movie for us,
right?
Especially after like making the parallel with Rocky, I think probably makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Which
Rocky's a hero's journey, to some extent. Obviously, has a lot of the same elements. This one kind of does,
in
a very just a distorted, broken way.
Okay, so one other thing on this movie, then I think we should probably start talking about the sequel.
Agreed.
So, okay, the score for the audiences on this one is actually 89, which is good. But if they were just doing that just to kind of like be like, oh, those critics, then I would expect that to be higher, like a 96 or 97.
I suppose.
So why is it not higher than what it is?
That's a good question.
Is it just too dark, you think? That some people went into it expecting like a fun Batman thing and then was just like, oh my God.
part of me does really wonder, like, how much does the dissociation affect it?
Yeah.
Because of, because it does hurt it. It either helps it or hurts it. Or I think maybe in this case, both.
Yeah.
Because the Joker name will get butts in seats.
Yeah.
But also it's going to make you think, oh, well, I remember Heath Ledger and I remember Jared Leto.
Mm-hmm.
So what is this? And it's like, well, this doesn't have Batman in it. And so everyone realizes
Sure
sure, the Joker is this famous dichotomy, and you only get one side of that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, but I don't know if I think I had understood enough about what was going on in the background to know that was probably going to be something along those lines. Because I was like, hey, so it's not part of the DCEU. It's really not part of DC officially. So I was like, I don't really know what to expect.
Yeah.
And then I got this, and I was like, wow, that was extremely surprising in a bunch of ways.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it could be partly that. It could be partly that my reason that it's just really dark.
Well, I can imagine some people going in and thinking it's going to be like fun, and then it's just so dark that, because I do see audiences sometimes
because you expect like
I didn't get it,
like the chaos that comes with Joker, right? The kind of malicious chaos that he embodies. This one is just malice, and it's not like it's gory or anything, which I think it does it really tastefully how it handles the violence and stuff.
Yeah.
But like, it is also really oppressive violence. Like, he chases this guy down while he's trying to crawl away and like executes him on the ground.
Yeah.
Executes Murray, and he like smothers his mom in a hospital bed, and it's like,
whoa.
Again, it's all really dark. It's like, gosh.
We debated how much this actually fit for Halloween, because it's dark. It's not necessarily horror.
Right.
So.
But I mean, you definitely feel it at the end of the film. Like, his coworker, he stabs him in the eye and like bashes his head against the wall. And it's just like, okay. All right. Yeah, again, like, some of you feels for the guy just because of how much he's been beat down. But then he starts just snapping like that. And you're like, I got any more sympathy for what you're doing here, man. Like, this is not the way you should be handling this problem. But like, at some point you wonder, well, what other message does he have? Because it really makes you feel like he has no other way of communicating. No one's listening to him that are supposed to. No one's listening to him.
We've exhausted all other possibilities.
Yeah, like he has this perceived reality that Thomas Wayne is his father, and he won't even entertain the thought of talking to him. He just hits him.
Right.
To be fair, he's like threatening his kid and stuff. So warranted.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's the thing. It's like, it's not justified, but it does make sense why it's happening.
Right. Yeah, which is the value of the story, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that all being said, we went and saw the second one. I think I know what they were trying to do, and we're gonna try and be as generous as we can with this film, because, that one, there's a lot of narrative around this film, and there was a lot going on before the film released as well. So I knew that this was going to be a musical and that Lady Gaga was starring in it, and I was like, those are two bad decisions. I was like, but you know what? Let's give it a try. And I will say, I was wrong on one count. Lady Gaga did a decent job for what she was given.
I would have liked to have seen her more.
Right. Or fleshed out.
Which seems weird, but it's just like there's a lot of singing in this movie, and she just sings and sings and sings.
She just propitiates it constantly. It's like, stop.
She's not bad at it. It's just like, it's not movie acting. It's not the same thing. So it just, so the fact that it's a musical.
She's not given enough time to impress at all, and that's the problem. So it has 32 from both.
Which we agreed when we got out of the theater was too harsh, but understandable why it's there. And our scores, I think, were both in like the 65-ish range.
Yeah, I think I went with 65 when you asked me.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. 60, 65, something like that.
Okay. That being said,
which I know is double than what it says, but that's also like, almost half of what the original was. So take that into the context.
65 is not good. It is a failing grade, or close enough.
But there are some merits to the film. It's definitely beautifully shot. Let's get that out of the way.
Yes.
Gorgeous film.
It is a gorgeous film. The music felt fairly recycled, unfortunately.
Yeah. Acting was good though.
Acting was good.
Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga both did a great job, and all the new
Right.
characters they added were great too. Everybody did. Well, actually, no, except for one. The guy they got to play Harvey Dent, the district attorney. That was
Oh my gosh.
weird.
He's horrible. It was
Yeah,
like some kid that just got out of acting school and was like really trying to impress with the small part that he
and
got.
he was just snarky and
just like-
pompous and like.
And that's how he actually acted in the movie. I was like, oh, dude, come on.
He was just a farce. It was
yeah,
weird.
It was bad. No,
If he was supposed
totally inauthentic.
yeah. Well, I do have a longer comment with him.
Yeah. So, okay. So
I'll leave that for later.
I'll go into what I thought was good about the movie, or what they were trying to do good. I think they were trying to pull, again, this is all conjecture because it was very difficult to understand what they were trying to do. And that's the problem with the film. It felt like they were trying to do a sucker punch thing. And so Sucker Punch is about these girls in an asylum, and they go into these worlds of fantasy.
Talking about the movie Sucker Punch, the Zack Snyder film. Okay.
The film, the Snyder film. They slip into these worlds, these fantastic worlds, in order to accomplish menial tasks, but they're in an insane asylum, so reality to them is whatever they want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so these moments kind of visually cue you into, their mental stability and to what their goals are to get out of the asylum. And all that's fine for the film. Like, the movie's not that great, but it seemed like they were trying to do something similar with this movie.
Okay.
And the musical numbers
are the fantasy representation of what's actually going on.
Exactly. Is how they're trying to represent how they're, telling the story.
Mm-hmm.
On paper, that doesn't sound horrible.
No.
It sounds like a good concept. However, it's not executed well. Songs are not engaging. They barely play into like what it is they're trying to say, or at least that's how we interpreted it, because we couldn't really figure out what you're trying to say too often. The whole you're constantly like, hey, what are they trying to say? And neither one of us could figure it out. That was the problem with it. So with all that said, it was an odd decision. But when we watched the first one again, as my final comment here, as we watched the first one, I was noticing moments where I was like, okay, I can see where someone who's not paying full attention could understand this to be structured similarly to a musical. So that's all I'll say. Like, that's as positive as I can get.
Where they got it and we're like, there's a thread here.
Yeah.
It might just work.
It could be music. Like, nope. But all right. So
okay. So we should address the musical thing right off the bat. So the sequel has now switched genres because a musical is a different genre than what it was before. The original one was not a genre movie. That's why it was good. It was good because it was just a dark drama. That's all it was.
Yeah.
Comic book movies, genre. Action movies, genre. And musical is no different because the genre. What I mean by genre is not that like it prescribes to a certain number of like things like a prerequisite, but more that like it's willing to treat a number of things in the film in a kind of flippant or exaggerated way. It's like going to romanticize certain things in order to make it more glamorous or different than what it actually is. But you remember in the original Joker, anytime it made something like glamorous or more than what it was in Arthur's head. He's a crazy person. So his interpretation of it was all messed up.
Right.
And the difference with this movie is they thought that they were going to do the same thing. And they were like, well, we'll do musicals. What they didn't realize is that this creates two problems. The first is that in this movie, you're just in Arthur's head going through his musical numbers from start to finish. There is no objectivity at all at any point in the film, it felt like. It felt like we were just stuck in the mind of an insane person. And you're like, most of that time is spent either in a prison or in a courtroom. And it just got, and it's 20 minutes longer. It's like literally 20 minutes longer than the first one. It's so long, it dragged, it was exhausting. It was like, oh my gosh.
The musical numbers are also really long, and not justifiably so.
Well, and the other problem with them, and this is the second point, is that when you do a musical in a film, especially if you're talking about something like if your movie is just like I don't know, some like I'm trying to think what's like a lighthearted but pointless musical. Um, and that's like such a mean thing to say, but like maybe like Wizard of Oz, where it's like
Okay.
your music just needs to be nice and fun and kind of vaguely talk about the theme of the story. That's
Okay.
it. That's
Yeah.
all. Like the expectations are low for what that
That's
music
fair.
needs to
That's
do.
fair. Yeah.
In this, like what you're saying really is gonna matter because the last movie was super deep. We're expecting a super deep message with this one, so it needed to be. And it's true, neither of us like musicals, but I love Chicago. That's one of my
I love
favorite.
Phantom of the Opera.
And
So
you
like
love Phantom of the
we
Opera.
have ours, yeah.
So we do have musicals that are good. And the reason why I liked Chicago so much is that every song was like articulating an important facet of the character or driving the story forward. So it had a purpose. It was just an expressive, like, in an interesting way to convey the purpose of the story. And this movie was not doing that. There was like one, maybe two songs that kind of did that, where they played with things a little bit, and that was nice, but it was just not enough. And so it
It
just
wasn't
kind of
clear enough
like,
most of the
why?
time. That's yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't figure out the justification there. So basically, what it means is that you got the score, the Rotten Tomatoes score you deserve, because it's going to take like 5 or 10 years for someone to go like do a deep dive who really loves this movie and explain what each song is about and how it connects to like this larger theme or whatever.
Right, when it should be clear to an audience.
Right. It
Or
should.
as
We should have
clear,
just got it. You know.
Sure. I do think that there's something to be said about, meriting a rewatch and getting more from,
Yeah.
subsequent viewings. The thing about it was, even the first one wasn't clear enough for me to want to watch it again. Especially I would say almost exclusively because of the music.
Yeah.
Because they're such long pieces and they don't justify their existence. Like the one that I kind of understood with what they were saying was the mountain one, where she's like singing about how they're going to build a mountain, which that point in the movie itself didn't make a whole lot of sense. So it was already tough to follow, but I understood what they were trying to say. I was like, okay, she's not quite like, she's not, because usually it's
Yeah.
like we're going to build a wall or, whatever.
Or a castle or something
something
that you can actually build.
Yeah, something that's tangible, but they're basically going to build their fortress and they're going to be inside and the world's going to be outside. And I think that's what they were trying to say. And she was just saying mountain because she was kind of dissociative and she's crazy. When they sang the song, I was like, hey, I get what you're trying to say with this, but the song was too long and it was too, like,
And I've already got it.
right.
So now it just
exactly.
feels
They
like,
made the point already. Yeah.
Yeah, so now it feels like I have to sit here and just like we're gonna relish it. Like if you want to be
They're just
upset
gonna
about
sit in this point for this 5 minutes or whatever the scene is.
like if you wanted to be upset about the first film for being like a glorification of like, the
Mass
shooter
shooters
or
or whatever, yeah.
whatever,
Mhm.
it's like why didn't you be upset about this movie? Like this one would make
Why are
more
you
sense because
glorifying music?
yeah, well, not that, but like, but it's like they're making the music is like, well, let's just embellish something and really like,
Right.
get all about it. Here's what I think they should have done. I think because the case for the musical is that it's like it's the character's inner fantasy or whatever, and this is what some people are saying, like the sort of defenders of this movie are like, oh, well, it's like it's his inner thoughts and like it's his fantasies come to life.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, okay, I get that, but like I still don't like musicals. So like unless the musical number is going to do something meaningful for the story, it's just a distraction, and I'd rather not have it here.
Well, it's just a pause button. It's like pause. We're gonna listen to the song real
That's
quick
what
and
it
then
felt
get back
like.
into
Yeah,
the movie.
let's stop the movie. Let me do this, and then we go back. I think what they should have done is they should have merged more genres. I think because the movie actually opens with a cartoon. It's this animated sequence, like really very old school animation, and it kind of recaps the first film for you, but it sort of like gives an altered perspective on it, and it sets the premise for this movie. So I'm like, that's interesting. Do that. Do a musical number, one, maybe two, because you have Lady Gaga here.
Right.
So okay,
Might
we
as
can
well
do a
use
little
her
more.
talents, yeah.
But then they should have done other stuff too. Like for example, there's a sequence where they're trying to escape from this like the penitentiary or the asylum, whatever. And I don't remember what it was, but like they're trying to escape, and they turn that into a musical number. Wrong call. I would say make that like a Charlie Chaplin silent film escape sequence. Because that would have been like, whoa, what's happening? But I think people would have got it if they would done like different things throughout the movie to kind of like help accentuate how he just goes for one fantasy after another to try to explain away what's going
And
on.
almost like you kind of have multiple fantasies at the end that are kind of just like flipping through, and it's almost like he's
Yeah.
praying and he doesn't have, there's no
Right,
thread
right.
to like follow. It's just kind of,
So that's a solution.
it's distracting, but at least it would have conveyed that message more appropriately.
Yeah, you could have put it in black and white. And like you don't I'm not saying you need to make it super dramatic, like they shoot it exactly like an old school movie. I'm just saying you gesture a little bit in that direction.
Sure.
And then you get an interesting commentary on because this is the thing that some people are talking about where it's like the film's commenting on our expectations. Which harkens back to another figure who shall not be mentioned.
Really like the word subversion around here. But go ahead.
But yes, like this idea is like, well, we all know the Joker character, and everybody wants to see the Joker character in a particular way. This movie does not deliver on that. And I think the people who defend it are, from what I was gathering in my research, is that they were like, well, this is like, it's interesting that he's a human character. It's interesting that he wants to be seen as Arthur Fleck, but the rest of the world is only interested in the Joker. And that's coming from everybody. They have different reasons for wanting that to be the case, but that's what they all want. And then him taking this starch, like, no, like I'm me and I'm a person and I'm not this monstrous thing. Because like, they try to come up with this angle like, oh, it's split personality disorder, which is like misdiagnosis because like he himself like admits to his own doings in the movie, and he's like, it's not like a different person, like that was me, I did those things, like
Right.
like he's actually more honest about it than his lawyer defender is. She's like, well, this is how we have to do, this is how we
Right.
have to run this narrative so you can get the treatment
Would
you
they
need.
have to manipulate truth in order to
Yeah.
gain the outcome that they want instead of actually addressing the problem?
Mm-hmm.
Which that was an interesting concept in the film. I wish
Yeah.
they had done more things like that. But the thing that they did was she's just trying to be like, no, the Joker's a different person and not Arthur Fleck, and that's how we're going to set up this defense. And then he hates this message, and he's like, it's not actually getting him anywhere. And so finally he just fires her, and he's like, I'm just going to go back into the madness.
Yeah.
And just, I'll defend myself. And then that's when he descends into these fantasies. And so, like, those concepts were good. It almost felt like it should have just been a courtroom drama, because there's a couple moments in there that I thought were decent where, like, for instance, when they do that musical number and he's kind of like wandering around and then he kills the judge with the hammer and stuff, or with the gavel.
Yeah,
like,
but it's like a giant cartoon looking hand.
Exactly. And it's
hammer,
very reminiscent of original Joker, themes and motifs. That those parts felt good because it was like, okay, we don't know.
This actually serves something to the story.
There's that, but it also plays into the madness thing. Is like, you don't know what reality is here. You just know what he wants to be reality, and how he's like, I wish I could just do this. It's dark, but it's like, this feels like what the character would be at this point.
Yeah.
But they, it almost feels like it should have been a courtroom drama, the whole thing. And this was like the back and forth that they had. Instead, they introduced Harley, which in itself is not a bad idea. It's fine. It just, none of it added to the character of Arthur Fleck from the first film.
Yeah.
It didn't like expound. It didn't move forward. It just kind of, he just found someone who'd accepted him, and then he fantasized about it until he pushed her away.
Yeah.
And because of that, like, you're so stuck there that she doesn't get to be fleshed out at all in any meaningful way. Like, she's nothing about her that's like, I want to follow more of this. It's just kind of like subservient to Arthur's depiction of her.
Which is really a problem because she has a quote unquote more objective point of view. I mean, she at least can
She's
participate.
supposed to, yes.
She can at least participate in more exciting events in the story because she's not locked up. I mean, she is temporarily, but then she's released. So it's like,
but the point of Harley Quinn is that she's either just as crazy or trying to be just as crazy as the Joker. And in this film, she does neither. She's just kind of this like person that just kind of flows through his life. And you wonder if she's real at a certain point, because you're like, did she really exist, or is she like a conjuring of his imagination or something? It feels so disconnected that you ask that question, because you're like, well, they sing, and then she like highly romanticizes their relationship, But it would have been better if they had like escaped the prison that time when she set the piano on fire.
Yeah,
Because
that
then
would have
at
been
least it
good.
would have provided some opportunity for them to do things that would flesh her out. Instead, they get pulled back in, and then she releases herself voluntarily because she admitted herself voluntarily, and then just joins the trial to support him.
Yeah.
And you're constantly left wondering why. What is it? Like he sees her as someone who accepts him. She sees him as this figure that she's heard all about on the news, and there's this movie that was made about him and stuff. But otherwise, there's not a connection that they have, right?
Yeah.
The connection is the perceptions of one another.
Yeah.
Whereas the original Harley and Joker have a connection that they have, right? She's the psychiatrist, he's the disturbed individual, and then she actually falls in love with him. She becomes mad
Yeah.
with him, which is a compelling narrative. And you don't have to follow that one necessarily.
Yeah.
But it would have been, it would have played more to the themes of what they were, I think, what they were trying to do, at least what I assume they were trying to do. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that would have given us something.
Yeah, we struggled. We went and talked about it afterwards, and we're like, well, what were we supposed to get out of this movie? Because the only thing that's tangible is at the end, and we'll go over that in a minute. But
yeah, there was a part at which I started to feel like so there's this scene in one of the songs where Joker and Harley are doing this like musical number, and it's like their show, and so it's in front of a live audience, and they have like a show, and it's like it's not real, it's just some fantasy or whatever. But in that, like they have this like playful disagreement with each other, and as they're going through that, you start to see the cracks in their relationship, and you're looking at this going, this is a toxic relationship. This was never going to work, right?
This is the definition of toxic relationship.
Right. And then she pulls a gun on him, and then it's like
How
part of the act.
Solve problems, that's what I say.
And then she shoots him, and this is parallel to like him because he's like, oh, like I'm being betrayed. And like when that happened, my mind went to the room with
everyone betray me.
Everyone betray me. I'm fed up with this world. And so this feels like a modern attempt at a remaking of The Room.
It's the Room sequel, don't you know?
It's the Room sequel, yeah. It's a remake of The Room.
I'm fed up with this world.
Everyone betray me.
Yeah, even in the courtroom trial. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Oh, hi, Tommy. I didn't realize that was you.
Oh, hi, Joker. I didn't know that was you.
Bye, doggy. Just doing like weird stuff.
Yeah, it felt that disconnected. I mean, the quality is obviously far superior, but still.
Yeah. I mean, they're doing it, with more like, better production values. But at the same time, it started to feel like that was basically the same message. It was just like it's a character who feels betrayed by the world. You don't understand
why.
You don't understand why.
The first film was very clear about who betrayed him and why. This one, you're like, I don't get it, man.
Yeah.
Again, he's already cracked, from the first movie. So you already understand, okay, this is where he's at now.
Yeah.
And I think they were playing to that too hard, right? They didn't add anything else to like walk you along. It was just like you're in the mind of a crazy person.
Mm-hmm.
Which again is not a terrible concept, but you got to give something that we can grasp, right?
Yeah.
The audience has to, because we're not crazy people, and so
we're just trying to understand.
Right, we're just trying to watch the movie. So...
Yeah, it felt like it was just asking so much from me, like because I was more or less enjoying it the first like hour or so, because there's not actually that many songs in the first chunk of it, and there was a few, but it wasn't that bad. And I was like, oh,
there was like 6 songs or 7 songs for the whole movie, which is a lot of movie time.
Yeah. I mean, so I was kind of keeping pace with it for the most part, but then it just started to feel like so many scenes were repeats. Like we'd go to the courthouse, we'd do some stuff, then we'd go back to the prison, do some stuff, then we'd go back to the courthouse and kind of like repeat what we just did. And it just had like this such a slower pace to it. Like, and mind you, I like slow paced movies, but I like it when they're filled with lots of interesting things to say. And this movie wasn't.
No.
So it has this moment like where they call in Gary, or Puddles, yeah, who's the guy from the first movie who, that he spared, that he didn't kill in his apartment. He kills the other clown that he used to work with instead. So they bring him into the courthouse, and it's just this super long, like showing him walking in, showing him sitting down. Right. It's just like dude, like I get it, but like you kind of you don't realize you've spent all your slow time. Like it's gone at this point. So we need something to happen in this movie. And that- excuse me, that seemed like another point of like I don't want to say like the writer and the director were being they were trying to subvert to expectations. I don't think that was really the case. I don't think they were like, well, you want an exciting event in this movie, so we're not going to give it to you. I don't think
Yeah,
it was
no, it
like that.
wasn't that malicious.
No, I don't think so at all. But
It
I
just seemed
do.
like they didn't have a clear vision or a clear message they wanted to convey,
Yeah.
or that they didn't know how to convey it. I can't really figure out which one it is, but
And they were playing to the movie's musical numbers to add excitement to the film without recognizing that all of them are fantasies. So like nothing exciting happens in the whole movie.
right.
So it just made it it's like I wouldn't say it's as dark as the first one. I think it's way less dark, but I think it's way more dreary and just like agonizing.
Let it end.
Yeah, it's kind of like that because you know, and I'm not saying it needs to be more dramatic. I'm just saying like this is a movie and you've got an interesting character here.
Right.
You could have some pretty exciting things happen
Sure.
and you're just
The
not
first one did it.
Yeah, the first one managed it just fine, I think,
Yeah.
and that's a fairly slow movie
Well,
too, to be
they
honest.
do sing a little bit in the first one. Like he sings to his therapist there at the end. But
Yeah.
it was like a testament to because he says a line where she asks if he wants to talk about these things, and he's like, "You wouldn't get it."
Right.
And it's like,
Which is now reinforced from the whole movie of no one getting it. He
right.
was telling them, he was being gracious, and now it's like now there's someone who does want to know. It's like, of course he's just going to say you wouldn't
Which
get
plays
it,
into
which
the
is like a
comedian
joke,
theme, right? Because the jokes are so subjective,
right?
and so like everyone thinks that they're the authority on what's funny and what's not.
Right.
And so him having the arrogance of being like, "Oh well, if I told you, you wouldn't get it."
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, well, I mean, I guess from his experience, I would understand why he came to that conclusion. But then he just starts singing. He's like, "There's nothing else for me to do here, and you know that I'm crazy, so I'm just gonna sit here and sing."
Right. You're reinforcing the crazy, so
Right.
therefore that's what I will be. Yeah.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it does it masterfully with that too. So yeah, I mean,
But this one is just like so much more like self-indulgent, is what it felt like. It just felt like a very
it does have that.
self-indulgent
Yeah,
film.
it's almost like he got high in his own fume from the first film. I don't know if it's the same people or not. We try not to look at too much of that. I just want to evaluate the film for the film.
Mm-hmm.
And this one is a sequel, so we have to evaluate the sequel as a sequel.
Yeah.
And as a sequel and as a film, I thought that it was fairly ineffective as as a whole. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that assessment. I think the things it is wanting to talk about are there, but it just feels like you have to do all the work to get the value from it, as
Yeah.
opposed to the movie presenting you with some like thoughtful things to think about or to be compelled by. Like for example, there's this whole like sub narrative with
Guards.
the guards,
Yeah.
where they're asking him like they're like, oh well, like tell us a joke,
We'll
and then
give you
we'll
a
give you a
cigarette or
cigarette.
something. Yeah.
So, it's kind of like reminiscent of, I mean, a number of different things, right? Like how his relationship with his mother was like, and how, clowns, this is your expectation, you be the funny man. And you can draw a parallel with that with like in history too, of what like the court jesters had to go through. But, it's like none of that is really like played up in the movie. It just does that same kind of scene like 4 or 5 times over. And it's like, I don't need this interaction again. I got it the first time. And again, like, why didn't you like harken back to like a play? Do a scene that's kind of like a play and then lean into like the court jester theme. And then now we're playing with that idea. But you see, like, it just felt like it would just go, went back to its default mode, which is
It's
musical.
like it didn't trust the audience enough to understand. They had to keep reiterating certain points.
Yeah, yeah. And it just felt like, and then there's this like whole other sequence where they like rape him or something like that. It's not clear what happens, but it just starts to be like, so where are we going with this?
Right.
Like, what am I doing with this?
That scene
like,
especially, because again, it's implied. You don't really know what happens. But he mocks them or something at court.
Yeah.
Or he tries to say what, these guys have been mean and bullying and stuff. And so because he calls them out, they like beat him up and rip his clothes off and stuff. And so it's like, okay, so what am I supposed to get from this? Because it was shocking and I couldn't let it go because I was like, I don't understand why I just saw this. Like, what was the point of this scene?
it's not linked with the rest of the
Yeah,
narrative
it doesn't
like the
continue.
first one was. So
Right.
it's a lot harder. It's just sort of like, here's a thing, and you're like,
Just dark and disturbing, and then you just move on. Because in the first one, all these things happen progressively until he retaliates, until
yeah,
retribution comes. Retribution doesn't quite come the same way in this film, but also like it's not building to anything specifically. It's just, I guess it's pushing him into the arms of Harley or into his delusions. But the
yeah,
first movie did that. So it's like, well, why do
right,
we need to tell the same narrative again? I don't understand how this is expounding on it. It's just like, oh, well, here it is again
yeah,
in a lesser format, because the first one's so masterfully done. And I'm not trying to say that you have to be as good or better than the first one, but you've got to follow the standard at least, right? Like, you gotta,
right,
like this just did not. It went in such a different direction that it was like, so now it feels like you're not even taking yourself seriously.
right.
And so that was, I don't know. It's
Yeah. So yeah, a couple other things I want to touch on.
sure.
So like, what was the decision like? What are we trying to do with this movie? I feel like that was a question that really needed to be addressed more thoroughly before they made it, because
Right.
you have the sequence at the end where they blow up the courthouse and then he kind of fumbles out of it, and then he gets picked up by some people dressed up as him, as the Joker. They pull him in a car and they're like, "We're going to save you, man." And they're like driving away or whatever. And it was kind of this moment where I was like, "Oh, this reminds me of how the Joker character will influence other people who are easily manipulated
Hmm.
and kind of be like, oh, yeah, I can use you as a tool." And I was like, oh, that's cool that they're kind of playing into that. But then it just sort of like drops it and
He
then it
just gets
doesn't
out
mean
of the car
anything.
and runs off.
Yeah. So you're like, I guess it was like there briefly, but
Right.
like it doesn't feel like it really, it's not, the impact is so removed because it's not like tied to like the larger themes of the picture.
Right. How did that one end? The second film?
Well,
Right. Though. Yeah.
yeah.
See
Do you want to talk about
that's how
that?
disconnected it is because I'm just like because the first one has such a beautiful ending, like it's a perfect ending for the film.
And it's an ending that doesn't ask for a sequel in any way. And I think that was another concerning thing that needed to be figured out and be like, we solved we basically said everything with that first one. So if we're going to drag all this back up, we need to have something else
You
that
need
we're
to
going
have
to
a real
say.
clear reason why.
I think Harley Quinn is a good start, but I don't think it's enough, especially if you're not going to make
Well,
her a
Harley Quinn
central
is a good
character with
start
her.
if it's Harley Quinn. If
Right.
that is all that it is. The
Right.
thing
Why
is,
not
they
just
just
make it her movie?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been great. I would have loved that movie,
Yeah.
but they dilute it so far that she just kind of gets pushed to the side, and it's like, well,
And they
I
don't
came
develop her character. They don't explain her
right,
backstory or anything. So it's just like,
right. Yeah. So the end of the first film, after he looks up from the mic, he goes out in the hallway and he starts running, and he leaves like these red footprints on the white hall, and so it's almost like giving you all these clues as to like
mhm,
you don't know what's real and what's not. So you just kind of make it whatever you want it to be. However you
mhm.
wanted that film to be, whatever you want to interpret from that film, that's the point. And so in the second movie, like it's hard to make a second film from that because you've just told me that you don't know what reality actually is. So I'm going to go into the second movie with that in mind. And then like so my anchor point at that juncture would be Harley. That's how I would interpret that.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you're going to have to add something real here.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been interesting if it was a series of, psychiatric meetups with the two, and you could
Mhm.
delve into it and try and figure out his psyche. Like that would have been a more compelling narrative, and watch her descend into madness. Like watch him drag her into it.
Yeah.
Like that would have been followable, and it would have had a point, and would have helped me understand its justification as a sequel to what clearly was not asking for a sequel in the first place.
Yeah.
So all that being said, it did have an ending that I now remember. Just saw it a couple days ago, and I was like, and again, it was all just so disconnected. I was just like, oh, yeah, that was the ending for the second Joker film. Okay. So what happens is you get these glimpses of this other inmate, this random person that
Yeah.
not named, is not mentioned, is not even acknowledged. It just has the camera focus in on him occasionally. And you're like,
And you're like, who is this
why?
person? Why does it matter?
Right. And it turns out he's the one that stabs Arthur Fleck in the end and then cuts a smile on his face. And here's the other problem, and I think this is one of the bigger ones, is that is clearly evocative of another Joker character, which is not terrible, but the point of the film was that it wasn't connected to the DCEU or any other DC properties. It was
Yeah.
just a Joker standalone movie. You are now intrinsically connecting it to something else. And it's like, again, why? And I think, so if I'm being as generous as possible, I think it was to just show that the Joker is nameless, faceless, personless. It's just a mantle that anyone can wear.
Yeah.
It's this dark Batman, right? Because Batman can be worn by all these number of characters too.
Yeah.
The mantle of the Joker is the same thing. Like, I get that. But the thing is, like, you're connecting it to another specific property. And so it's
Yeah.
like, all right, again, you have to justify why you're doing that, why that's your choice.
Yeah.
Because if he had just killed him and then sat down and laughed, then it would have been just as effective. Like, you would understand just as
Agreed.
well
Yeah.
as if he cut a smile on his face. So again, it's not the worst decision. It's just it has no justification, and that's what so many of the problems in this film are. Is that, like, I failed to find the justification of these reasoning, and it's like, okay, but that's the problem most people had. Was like, if I'm evaluating this critically, and we're both watching, trying to understand this film, and we're trying to be generous with this movie, then a general audience that is not going to give you that much grace,
Right.
they're not going to give you. They're just going to be like, this sucks.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to give you another chance. So, anyway, what was your point on that? Sorry.
Well, so no, I think that was a really appropriate way to, or like a really good breakdown of that scene, because I do think you're right that him like slashing his face is like now making us think of other things,
Right.
and that's damaging our perception of this, which has had this until now this really grounded perspective on life. Which again, it's like now it's a genre movie,
Yeah.
so it's less grounded. So like you can do those things, but also like it's just another reminder that we're like getting further away from the effectiveness of the first one.
Right.
So it's kind of like you could take that as like the final like nail in the coffin. Is like, no, it's not. It's like this is just a fun, interesting movie.
Yeah.
But I don't think it is though. I don't think he's trying to make. I don't think he's like. I think he wants to play with the genre and make that like an interesting commentary. I think he just didn't execute it well. I don't get the impression that he wanted to just make it like a fun comic book movie. That I don't think that's true at all.
No, I agree. Yeah.
But
yeah.
but you could see how.
But then you damage
he
that
leaves
point
himself,
by doing that.
right?
Yeah.
You damage. Yeah, you create a contradiction there. The other part about that. So okay, so like the part I think that does work in that interaction is that Arthur is like kind of, he takes this stance at one point in the trial where he says to the jury, like, okay, like I did these bad things and I knew they were wrong, but like I'm also like a person. Like here's my humanity, and he's like kind of real with them. And when he does that, it's totally inauthentic. It's on completely deaf ears. And it's on deaf ears because he's acted like a totally insane person all up until this moment.
Which
So
is because he's romanticizing and fantasizing with Harley.
Right. So he's basically destroys all of his credibility, and then he gives that message, which is like,
Right.
it's kind of sad because you recognize there is humanity to what he's saying. He is not wrong there. It's just that we're not going to see that message now because you've presented
Well, no one's
such
going to
a
accept
horrible
it. Yes.
external. Yeah, no one's going to accept it, and the jury doesn't, obviously.
Naturally.
Um,
Go figure.
but then like, and you know, just as a side note, I don't understand why he switched. Like what made him change his mind.
Again,
that
not
really
justified.
bothered me.
Yeah.
I was like, why? I was like, it seemed like he was frustrated with his lawyer, so he fires her and is just like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be the Joker. I'm just going to embrace all this stuff that everybody's
Right.
like telling.
Which is what draws Harley to him.
Yeah. Which is a repeat of the first one.
Right.
The first point's the narrative of the first. So I don't know. But anyways, all that aside, that does happen. If you're willing to figure out how that works, you get to that end scene where this guy comes up and stabs him. The one part of it that is working is that, okay, so Arthur is committed to, I'm going to be a human being. I'm not going to be this Joker thing. That's this nightmarish thing that I have to put aside.
Right.
So if he does take that stance, when the guy comes at him and stabs him, he would perceive him as just some insane. Now,
sure.
Because he's actually like come to his own sanity. And that's how the other guy presents himself. He's just a loony. He's just like stabbing him, and there's no like.
Well,
he's
tells
a
a
comic
joke.
book character.
He tells a joke too. He's like, what happens when a psychopath comes into into a encounter with a clown or something like that.
Yeah.
And then he stabs him.
Yeah, he's like, he gets what he deserves, and then like, and knifes him. So you're like, okay, I could kind of see that, but then like, see, like, this is that fine line. Like, okay, here's the comic book version of the character coming out and like coming face to face with the real life person who then just gets butchered and murdered.
Yeah.
So there's like a potentially a meta commentary about like how comic books or like, you know, superhero storylines actually destroy humanity on some level because they are just going to be reverted back down to just like cackling
Right.
as the villains or whatever, you know? So that I thought was an interesting thing, but and like maybe that works, but it just didn't feel like it didn't work in the broader context of the movie because it embellished so much with the musicals. And I
Yeah.
keep harping up on that, but like it's like you are saying like this is a deep, thoughtful, non-genre movie, and then you have such a genre thing take up like half the amount of screen
Right.
time. So what am I supposed to do with this?
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
like
make up
the
your
two are
mind.
not compatible.
Is it one or the other? Yeah, give me something.
You're not just doing musical numbers for the sake of commenting and critiquing musicals or genre
Right.
films. You're doing them to make pleasurable musical numbers in the movie. That's what it felt like. So
Yeah,
it just
and it
was
should have
like,
been to make a point.
yes,
Which
right,
again, we agreed with what we thought to be the points.
right,
I like the romanticization of their relationship, and then kind of the creases of reality that shine through every once in a while. But like that can be accomplished in one or two songs. Way more than that, and
yeah,
eventually you just get exhausted. You're like, I got it. Yep, cool. Can we
yeah.
please
12
watch the
songs
rest of it?
later, it's like,
Yeah, please stop. um.
yeah,
Well, do you have any further final thoughts?
it was all right. It wasn't great. It was,
It was better than people made it out to be, but it
yeah.
is not a good sequel. I'll just keep it there.
It's not nearly as strong as the original,
Right.
and that's
And that's a problem because
yeah,
the first one is so specific and it's so well told
yeah,
that you've got to continue at least most of that. Like you have to have at least an 80% of that film or of what made that film good into the second movie, and it felt more like 50 or 60. Like, man, you guys
yeah.
felt way short, way too short for this to be justifiable. And that's the problem. So as a movie and as a sequel, like it just didn't do that well.
It feels like it only works on a meta level, which I feel like is not enough.
Yeah, and even that was
Even that you gotta
very
figure it out
yeah,
yourself.
yeah,
How
you
that's
got to
gonna
read
work.
them in.
Yeah, it's not just gonna hand it to you,
Right, you got to
which is
interpret all the messages.
which is fine. But I got to do everything. It's just like this is homework.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't want to like you're supposed to make the movie. I'm not. But anyway.
Yeah.
So, well, that was fun. I think it was topical. Obviously, the movie just came out. The second movie just came out. So,
Do you recommend people go see it?
I recommend waiting for it to come out. I wouldn't see it in theaters. I don't think it's worth that. Worth a ticket.
Just watch the first one.
Yeah, just watch something actually good. So, anyway, that's been our commentary on the Joker and its sequel, which we can refuse to acknowledge if we want. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next.